It's no longer really an opportunity or choice, it's an imperative. To telling the story, how do we make sure that we're taking full advantage of any and all assets that are on the grid and at customer premises.
Each episode, we delve into the world of energy, aiming to bridge the gap of understanding and challenge conventional thinking.
Welcome everyone, this is the third episode of the ei360 podcast, and I'm joined with David Swink, our CEO, and I'm Sandi Coughlin. And this month, we're going to be talking about microgrids. David, last month we introduced our audience to our InExchange headquarters in McKinney, Texas. We had everyone on the roof, we looked at solar arrays, and today we have a special treat because we're coming from you from Stillwater, Oklahoma at our innovation lab here. And David, I'm kind of overwhelmed here. So I would love for you to kind of give our audience a tour, introduce everyone to other team members who work out of this facility and all the wonderful things that they do for our company and especially microgrids. So, David?
Well, it is great, Sandy, to be here in this, what we call Innovation Lab. Last week we were standing on the roof of our McKinney microgrid and really kind of beginning to launch this podcast and sharing with folks just really, what a microgrid consists of. And it's exciting to be here because this is really kind of home base, or was the original home base of and the birthing of basically InExchange. I want to make sure that one of the things we share as we start today is we have so much talent here in this innovation lab. A lot of our staff, employees work here, and they're going to have the opportunity today to be introduced to one of our stars. Yep. We got a lot of stars. Really all of our team members are stars at NX, but they're going to have an opportunity today to hear from Will Clay. Will was with me when I was at the utility, managing the utility. Will started out at the utility, did a lot with smart grid, did a lot with drones, and just a real innovator. And so we call this an innovation lab. We really truly have people here who are innovators. Before we start touring, Sandy, I also would say I think one of the statements that I heard in life that I think kind of speaks to this podcast is challenges are what keeps life interesting, but it's overcoming them that makes life meaningful. And when you think about a lab, you really think about how do we take technology, how do we take a lot of these disruptions that are happening in the marketplace, these challenges that are happening for utilities, that are happening for consumers, and how do we turn them into meaningful solutions, meaningful opportunities. And that's what the lab really represents, and I really appreciate that about our team, because our team is very solution-oriented, but very oriented toward providing meaningful experiences, meaningful solutions. And we believe at NX, if we can do that, then we truly make the client successful. And our goal really is to make our clients the heroes, to make them successful. That's really our job. And a lot of what happens here is about creating that assurance of that, because when you're doing testing and you're working through a lab environment, what you're trying to do is make sure that what you deliver to the client is safe, reliable, secure, all the things we know that needs to happen in this marketplace. A lot of what they're going to see today truly relates to that meaningful experience and making things secure, reliable, and affordable. So we'll start the little tour here.
Absolutely, and I guess we also want to talk about some of the case studies that relate to these different areas on the tour. So we'll start over at the weather chamber.
Yeah, we're going to walk right over here, and we're going to have the opportunity to actually meet Will Clay. And again, as I introduced a moment ago, Will has just really done a tremendous job for InExchange and helping lead us in the area of not just innovation, but really leading us in being impactful on a lot of fronts. This weather chamber that you're seeing here behind me was designed, engineered, constructed by Will and his team. Actually, the gentleman standing behind the camera, Matthew Scott, was instrumental in working with Will on many of what we're going to show here today, much of what we're going to show here today. And so the weather chamber, Sandy, really is about how do we ensure that a lot of the sensors, the devices that we're putting in the field, operate effectively and efficiently in different climates. And Will, I know when you first brought this to our attention and talked about it, we had some circumstances with clients where we had different climates. And so, if you would, Will, could you kind of share a little bit of what makes the weather chamber is such a value proposition for NX and our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So the key behind the weather chamber is we can simulate any condition from any place in the world right here inside of our lab. So if we have a device that we want to deploy in the mountains, let's say up in Oregon, or if we have a device we want to deploy in South Texas in the heat, we can simulate those conditions here without having to go and actually visit those locations to see what's going to happen. So for example, sunlight, we can emulate exact characteristics of sunlight for solar powered devices. We can emulate temperature, we can emulate humidity, we can emulate rainfall and precipitation, all right here within our facility. So that's good for validating measurements and from the actual sensors themselves, all the way to validating whether or not the solar panel and the battery pack that are paired together for that device are going to be sufficient for the area that we're deploying them in. Because different spots in the world get different amounts of sunlight, get different solar radiation, temperatures affect batteries, all of these factors play into that.
That's great, because the one thing that I'm sure our clients cannot afford is to buy something that is meant to be intelligent, and then to find out in a severe circumstance or an event that intelligence is not available. So we're going to walk on down here, Will, and talk about a few other, I would say, lab equipment, if you will. Again, we mentioned earlier, Sandy, that in McKinney, Texas, we have, as the audience saw last week, our McKinney microgrid. And one of the things that's very challenging in providing this reliability and providing kind of what we're talking about here. If you've noticed, we're kind of awkward about where we stand and how we get things. Bear with us. But it's really about making sure that we can simulate prior to putting in a microgrid. That we can basically create or recreate that particular event, whether it be dealing with resiliency, whether it be dealing with demand response. A big part of what we provide to our clients is what we call a digital twin. And I think to some degree what you're seeing here is that digital twin. How do we take and put this into our system, our platform, and all the data points, and basically be able to simulate the exact same data points that are on the McKinney microgrid. And so again, our team has created here a microgrid simulator that allows us to simulate some of those things. So, Will, would you care to kind of share with everyone a little bit of what you all have done here and how we use this?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is it's our microgrid simulator, and it's simulating three main parts of any microgrid. You have the utility, the provider of the electricity, you have the microgrid itself, and then you have the loads, which could be buildings, houses, industrial loads, whatever that might be. So on the utility side, we're emulating the utility input from the meter all the way to the main disconnect into the microgrid. Microgrids can factor in several different variables: solar, battery storage, which we have here. We can emulate solar, just like I mentioned back there with the test chamber. We have a generator emulator, so there's no real reason to run an actual generator whenever we can emulate that here. So that's what's actually happening in this box. And then we have our grid interactive controller, which is here within this box, and that's what orchestrates all of this. And then on the load side, we have our secondary load, and we have the ability to simulate things down to a resolution of about 10 watts. So we can actually control different loads and see what that's going to look like. So for example, just to kind of demonstrate this here, I can turn on a couple of loads. I'll leave that one off, it's pretty bright. And I can go over and we'll demonstrate the resiliency part of this. So let's say I just shut off our utility. So disconnect utility, and you can see there was a quick little blink, but the lights are still on. So the microgrid and controller actually detected that and switched us over to running off the battery. So now we're actually discharging from this battery. And this lets us design and build out these different schemes and playlists, essentially, of how we want this thing to operate right here within the lab without having to go out in the field and test new schemes or test new algorithms on a production environment. We can do it right here within our facility.
Will, I am constantly, just really sometimes taken back at not only what you have created here, done here, but just the depth of understanding of what is demanded in the marketplace. To kind of restate a few things that Will brought up today is to have not only a platform that can ingest all this data, which is what the NX platform represents, but then to be able to take that and actually begin to simulate that in real time, to really run those different simulations. But then when it's all said and done, then you have to have the ability to create the control schemes. And Will a moment ago mentioned this grid interactive controller, and I want to make sure to mention this again because one of the key elements of this new market that we're finding ourselves in is that idea of grid interactive controller. DOE, many of the national labs refer to that as a grid interactive efficient building controller. We call it grid interactive controller because we're connecting more than just buildings, and that's important to know. But what that allows us to do, it allows us to not only create that holistic experience, but it allows us to create those simulations, to create those control schemes, to say if this, then that, to do the edge computing, to do the artificial intelligence, to do those things that the market demands. So again, at the risk of just going on and on, we'll go on down the line here. And literally, when I say go on down the line, literally, we're going down the line here because what this represents is what we hear so often referred to in the industry as advanced distribution automation. People talk about ADMS system, advanced distribution management systems, SCADA systems, and what our team has done here, what Will has led here, is the ability for InXchange to literally tap into the DA component of SCADA. In other words, the data acquisition. Will, one of the things I've heard or read is that in the utility industry, less than 4% of the data that is being collected or has the capacity to be collected is being used by utilities. And one of the things, again, that I mentioned earlier about turning challenges into meaningful situations or meaningful experiences is how do we take and tap into that data? If data is the new gold, then how do we do that? And of course, our statement here is data is not the new gold, it's fool's gold. What's gold is insights. And so what you're seeing here is the ability to tap into downline breakers and regulator banks and capacitor banks, downline devices that have been invested in as far as intelligence, and now to be able to tap into that. So Will, would you share with us a little bit about what's been designed here?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is our smart controls test stand. This allows us to simulate controllers that are in the field and actually be able to interface with and connect to those devices. So what we have here is just a couple of relay controllers or recloser controllers, and we have a computer here which we actually run all of our software on. We can pull any data point we want from this controller and send it over any protocol that we ask for. So for example, we're doing EMP3 to MQTT conversion here at the controller. We're taking that data out of the controller, sending it to our platform over a secure MQTT connection without actually having to get on or integrate with the existing SCADA network.
Outstanding. And then lastly, we're going to show you one last sensor. Just to kind of walk through this again, we really wanted today, unscripted, to show you basically how we can test sensors, really in front of the meter, behind the meter. We wanted to be able to show you today how ultimately NX is working directly with microgrids that really represent in much where the industry is headed. We wanted to show you how we can literally connect to the grid and begin to see the grid in real time. And then, one of the things, Will, I think we've been very excited about for the last 2 or 3 years is that so many of the sensors are attached to quote-unquote intelligent devices. And yet the grid, the poles, the wires, the physical construct of the grid has always been a challenge. And again, it was Will who designed, engineered, came up with what we call a guy wire sensor. A guy wire sensor literally allowing us to now basically sense the physical condition of the grid. So, Will, you want to share a little bit about what this testing capability here represents?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is our guy wire test stand. What this allows us to do is actually emulate tension within a guy wire. So tension on guy wires change for several reasons. It can change in physical changes of the grid. So a pole breaks, a tree lands on the wires, a car crashes into a pole, or it can change based off of weather. So wind, icing, snow loading, snowpack, those different variables. And that can also change, well, also from temperature. So temperature is actually a big one that is not seen quite often, and it's not actually seen until you know to look for it. And that was one of the things that this sensor actually helped us look at. So as temperature increases, the wire sags down, and you can see a sag difference of several thousand pounds off of just the difference between day and night on any given day in the middle of the summer, as well as loading. So overloading of a conductor can cause it to heat, which is stretching, and that can cause sag or clearance issues. That can cause conductors to sag into other conductors and cause issues. And then also, again, back on the wind part, so ice and wind in icing areas. So Oklahoma experiences that quite often from ice storms. That causes galloping lines, and we can see that with the sensor. So this sensor is a passive sensor that just clamps onto the wire and does not require a lot of work to install. We don't have to take anything apart. You just go up there, you clamp it on, you install the transmitting device, which is the solar power and battery unit on the side of the pole, and it's ready to go. This lets us validate all of those readings and test every sensor before we ship it as well as needed.
Yeah. It's an exciting sensor, and Will, as you mentioned, many of the kind of use cases, we're of course, we've deployed this at a utility in Oregon. We're deploying this right now at a military base. And of course, continuing to expand the capabilities of this. And one of the things that I think is notable here is that a lot of what we've talked about today has really been, has had a lid on it because of the fact that you have to have a platform that can ingest this amounts of data and actually turn that data into insights. And you can just imagine how much data is coming through just this one sensor, because one of the things we've been talking about, is the ability for the guy wire sensor to detect a crossarm being broken, a stranded phase, the various things that happen to a physical grid, and beginning to apply machine learning. So, Will, thank you, and not only thank you for all that you're doing here, for your innovation, your continual, out of the box thinking, if you will. And Sandy, I really would love to see us, at the end of this podcast, maybe even list some of the names of people who work out of this facility, because we've got a great team here.
Absolutely.
That's what makes NX who we are, is to have great, outstanding employees who are innovative. I would just say, Sandy, in kind of closing, that I love the statement that if we're going to get uncommon results, we got to have uncommon thinking. And I think that innovation, as we talk about it today, is really that. It's uncommon thinking, and it's that uncommon thinking that Will, you continue to demonstrate, and our team continues to demonstrate, that provides us that ability to provide innovative solutions to our customers and clients, but again, meaningful solutions. I can't emphasize enough. For us, it's about making sure these types of solutions become meaningful solutions for our clients. So,
absolutely. I'm blown away. I hope that you enjoyed this first episode in August. It is only the first. We've got many more to come, lots of great guests, but Will, thank you so much for sharing this with us, and David, awesome job, and we will see you on the next episode.